The opulent chambers of Princess Alicia shimmered with crystalline lamps and golden threads woven into every tapestry, a silent testament to Lyrian luxury and control. But today, the palace suite resembled a crime scene. Hollow screens blinked with data projections, drawers gaped open, perfume spilled across marble, and the air carried a faint electrical hum from scanning drones slicing through her privacy. Alicia lounged on a long velvet couch, her polished black boots crossed elegantly, the faint smirk on her lips daring anyone to call her nervous. Her gaze followed the enforcers as they rifled through her belongings like scavengers. They looked ridiculous in their Federation armor, faceless and fidgety under her lazy stare. "Do you truly think you'll find a signed contract under my bed?" she asked, voice smooth as polished steel. "Perhaps a human mercenary stuffed in the closet?" Detective Fawcett, head of the enforcement team, paused mid-search. His green skin flickered under the light as his antennae twitched in irritation. "Princess Alicia," he said, tone clipped, "the Federation received reports that your people have been engaging unauthorized combatants. Humans, specifically." Her smile sharpened. "Then I won't waste your time denying it. Yes, we called upon humanity." A gasp rippled through the enforcers. Fawcett froze. His compound eyes widened as though he'd misheard. "You admit it?" "Of course," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "The Crota were winning. My people were dying. So we asked for help." Her tone was infuriatingly casual, as though she were discussing the weather, and not an act that could unravel interstellar diplomacy. Fawcett scrambled to activate his recorder, his chitinous fingers fumbling over the control pad. "Let the record show. Princess Alicia of House Lear admits that her people sought external military support from humanity during the Crotal conflict." He looked up, voice sharpening, "and that this request directly resulted in the destruction of 1/3 of the Crotal population within a single day." She tilted her head. "You make it sound so impolite." Fawcett stepped closer, lowering his tone. "You realize what that means. The Crotal are now classified as a protected species. Their civilization has regressed a century in a year. Your intervention didn't just end a war, it erased a culture." Alicia's violet eyes flicked toward a cracked mirror lying amid the chaos. Her reflection stared back, alien yet painfully human in her frustration. Irises spiraled with luminescent purple, red streaks coloring her pale skin as her body reacted to mounting anger. Her ears flattened slightly, betraying emotion she'd rather have hidden. She took a slow breath, smoothing her expression into regal calm. "The Crotals' own aggression destroyed them," she said coolly. "They wanted conquest. Humanity merely demonstrated how conquest feels from the other end of the gun." The room grew colder. Even the drone seemed to hover in uneasy silence. Fawcett broke it with a tired sigh. "Princess, the Federation doesn't care for moral justifications. The law is clear. Any exchange of military aid between non-Federation members and humans is prohibited under the Defense Pact of Standard Year 40,099. Alicia arched a brow. "And yet, humanity answered without a single credit exchanged. How strange." He pulled up a glowing timeline on his pad, wore statistics scrolling like a bleeding wound. 20 years of conflict, he recited. Lyrian casualties, 8 million. Resource loss, 60%. Territorial retreat, 1/3 of the empire. He tapped a flashing red line that cut across the chart. And then this, humanity arrives. Overnight, Crotal fleets collapse. Entire orbital foundries vanish. Do you expect me to believe this wasn't transactional? Her lips curved into an amused smile. Detective, if you think humanity needs incentive to act, you clearly haven't met one. His mandibles flexed in disbelief. Are you implying they did this out of charity? Not charity, she said. Favoritism. Fawcett's eyes narrowed. Favoritism? My sister, she said simply, as if that explained everything. She married a human. A few of the enforcers looked up, startled. Fawcett blinked several times. I beg your pardon? Oh, don't look so scandalized, she said, laughing softly. She met him at a trade conference on Core Station Theta. They debated philosophy and economics over too many bottles of Terran wine, and before long, she was sneaking off to Earth to visit him. Licia leaned back, her expression half fond, half mischievous. He was charming, in that infuriating human way, always making jokes when the stakes were highest. He proposed under a methane rainstorm on their third meeting. Fossip glanced toward his officers, who pretended not to react. "And you expect me to believe that this marriage, this cross-species romance, wasn't a cover for political coordination?" She laughed again, the sound light, but sharp. "You think too cynically. Humans don't need bribery. They fight for those they like." She gestured idly toward the hollow pad in his hand. "And they liked her." Fossip exhaled, trying to retain composure. "You're saying the entire intervention, planetary bombardments, orbital strikes, the annihilation of Crota warships, was because humanity liked your sister?" "Why not?" she said, shrugging. "It's certainly a better reason than the Crota gave for starting the war. Tell me, detective, would you rather ally with the Liarians, civilized, elegant, eloquent, or the Crota, who shed fur everywhere and smell like boiled sulfur?" A faint smile played across her lips as she added, "One of their diplomats once sat on my couch and left claw marks and an odor that lasted for weeks. My servants had to burn the upholstery. That earned a few muffled chuckles from the enforcers, quickly silenced when Fossip turned his head. His mandibles clicked in frustration. "Princess," he said quietly, "mockery won't help your case." Her humor faded. "I'm not mocking. I'm reminding you why humanity chose a side, without needing payment." He studied her carefully. "Still, a marriage is a form of exchange. Perhaps your sister offered companionship as part of this alliance? An incentive?" The air went razor-sharp. Licia's boot struck the floor with a sharp echo as she rose. "You will not speak of my sister that way," she said, her voice trembling, not with weakness, but with fury barely contained. Her union was one of love, not leverage. Even Fossip, usually unflappable, hesitated under the weight of her glare. The enforcers shifted uncomfortably. One drone beeped and quietly retreated toward the ceiling. "She met him long before this war mattered," Licia continued. "At the core resort during peace years. They bonded over Terran poetry and Lyrian logic texts. I remember teasing her. You can't fall for someone whose lifespan is half yours. She said time doesn't matter when someone makes eternity feel too long without them." Licia's expression softened just slightly. He left his world for hers. No treaties, no contracts, just faith. The silence that followed stretched for a long moment before Fossip finally spoke, quieter this time. "Then help me understand, Princess. Humanity's motives must be recorded. If we don't, others might follow this precedent." She regarded him, lips pursed, weighing something behind her luminous eyes. At last, she nodded. "Very well, detective. You want the truth? Then you'll have it. But understand, this isn't about politics or weapons or the Federation's laws." She turned toward the window, where the dying sun of her world cast fractured light through the crystal panes. "This is about history," she said softly, "and how easily we forget that love, not power, can start a war." Fossip hesitated, then nodded, switching his recorder to full capture mode. "Proceed, Princess Licia." Her gaze stayed fixed on the fading horizon. "It began with a meeting, one my sister wasn't supposed to attend." Princess Licia leaned back in her chair, folding one leg over the other, her voice taking on the calm cadence of a lecturer addressing students who needed to listen if they wished to understand the present. "You want to know why humanity became involved, detective? You must first understand where it all began. Long before my sister, long before the war." The recording lights glowed amber as Fossip nodded silently, gesturing for her to continue. "When the Galactic Federation first found us," she began, "we were little more than a legend in our own sky. Castles, swords, bows. Our people farmed by hand and prayed to stars we believed were our ancestors watching from the heavens. And then the Crota arrived." Her tone shifted, part reverence, part bitterness. "They came in ships that gleamed like living suns, descending through our atmosphere with noise that shook the bones of mountains. To our ancestors, they were gods. And when they stepped onto our soil and traded with us, we believed it was destiny. A young Federation officer, standing near the shattered dresser, frowned. With respect, Princess, what does this have to do with the current investigation? Licia's eyes flicked toward him, the faintest glow in her irises sharpening. Everything, Lieutenant. You cannot understand the Liarians' desperation or humanity's involvement without understanding what the Crotal took from us first. The officer swallowed hard and stepped back. Fossip raised a hand, letting her continue. For 30 years, the Crotal were our partners, she said. We traded fruit, seeds, and wildlife, small curiosities for their advanced tools. In return, they gave us machines that could till entire fields in minutes. They gifted us defensive emitters that ended centuries of border skirmishes. Within a few generations, we leapt from animal plows to automated harvesters, from herbal poultices to genetic medicine. Our cities blossomed in glass and light. For a time, we believed they had lifted us toward the stars. Her voice hardened slightly. Then came Silvervine. Fossip tilted his head. The stimulant plant. Banned substance under Federation Code 2291A. Once banned, she corrected. Not always. She stood and crossed the cracked window, looking out toward the palace gardens below. Wild now, their trellises overrun with silvery green vines that shimmered faintly under Liaria's twin moons. Silvervine was our native plant. Beautiful, fragrant, and almost sacred. We use it in small doses for ceremonies, to sharpen the mind and steady the hand. But to the Crotal, it became something else entirely. When consumed, it heightened their speed, strength, and endurance to supernatural levels. Imagine a stimulant that made an army twice as fast, twice as strong, and immune to fatigue. Fossip's antennae lowered. A perfect war drug. Precisely. The Crotal called it divine blood. They bought it by the ton. Trade flourished. Our farms expanded. They offered us technologies 1,000 years ahead of our development cycle. Fusion generators, gravity tractors, atmosphere processors, all in exchange for more Silvervine. Her voice grew quieter, but the plant was fragile. It grew only in specific valleys, where the soil was rich in silicate minerals, the humidity constant, and the temperature mild. When we tried to grow it elsewhere, the vines withered. The Crotal attempted artificial cultivation on their colonies, but every attempt failed. The vines lived, but the compound that gave them their potency, the spark, was gone. She turned, her expression sharpening. And so came the accusations. They accused us of hoarding, of manipulating supply to raise prices. Then they made an offer. Fossip's mandibles clicked softly. The relocation proposal. Licia nodded. They promised us a paradise, a terraformed world larger, more fertile, rich with infrastructure. In exchange, we would leave our ancestral home, and they would turn this planet into one endless Silvervine plantation. And you refused, Fossip said quietly. Of course we refused, she snapped, then composed herself. Our world is not a resource. It is our story, written in soil and stone. Every Lyrian valley carries memory, where our ancestors carved, planted, loved. We would not abandon it for profit. Fossip exhaled. That decision began what the Federation now calls the Silvervine conflict. Licia's gaze softened. A sanitized name for a slow genocide. She began pacing slowly across the ruined carpet. The Crotals started small, raids on border farms, theft of harvest shipments. Farmers vanished. Sometimes we found their remains weeks later. We pleaded with the Federation. They investigated, issued warnings, and fined the Crotals for rogue elements. The Crotals paid those fines with smiles and continued as before. Each year, the raids grew bolder. Each time, the Federation said, we'll review the reports. Her voice trembled faintly. By the time they realized it wasn't rogue captains but official policy, our valleys were burning. Fossip looked uneasy. The records list only limited skirmishes. The records were written by those who feared the Crotal, she replied. We lost tens of thousands. So we adapted, built walls around the farms, armed guards, automated defenses. It slowed them, but it also drew clearer lines. They saw us as competitors, no longer servants. She paused, her tone dropping into something mournful. When we developed spaceflight, the balance shifted. We could finally strike back. That was when the raids became invasions. The Federation tried mediation, Fossip noted. Tried, she said bitterly. The Crodal denied everything. Their diplomats smiled through every negotiation while their fleets bombarded our satellites. The Federation drafted resolutions, but words do not stop plasma. Fossip looked down at his pad. And this is what led to open war. Yes. He hesitated, antennae twitching thoughtfully. But where does your sister and her human husband fit into this narrative? Licia smiled faintly, not in amusement but in nostalgia. It began long before the war. My sister met Henry when things were still tense, but not yet apocalyptic. She admired humanity, their stubbornness, their fierce sense of home. She once told me humans reminded her of us before Crodal, defiant, inventive, unwilling to kneel. Her expression softened further. She shared Lyrian traditions with him, cooking meals from our home world. One day, she ground a pinch of silvervine into the spice blend. Just a culinary experiment. Henry loved it, said it made his food taste alive. Fossip blinked. He ate it? Oh, yes, Licia said, lips curving. To humans, it wasn't a drug. It was just flavor, an exquisite, aromatic spice that brightened everything from meat to bread. Within weeks, he shared it with his friends. And humans being humans, she gestured loosely. It spread. Fossip's eyes widened. You're saying silvervine became a Terran culinary export? Not officially, she replied, but unofficially it became an obsession. They called it purple spice. Every chef wanted it. Every colony market stocked it. Within 5 years, Lyrian silvervine was as common on Earth as salt. And then, she added with a quiet, knowing smile, my father saw an opportunity. The king of Lieria, Fossip murmured. Yes, he sold every silvervine farm outright to humans. Every acre, every valley, every root, under legally binding interstellar contracts. The deeds were filed publicly under Federation trade law. Fossip's antennae froze in disbelief. You sold your homeworld's core resource to outsiders? Licia's tone was calm, almost triumphant. Not outsiders. Protectors. Once human buyers owned the land. Any attack upon it became an act of aggression against the Terran Confederacy, a Federation signatory with defense rights. My father gambled that the Crodal would not dare strike human territory. And did it work? Her eyes gleamed. For a while, she said softly, until the Crodal decided they were tired of laws. The chamber fell silent, the hum of drones filling the air like the tension before a storm. Fossip's recording light blinked steadily as he looked at her, realizing she was leading towards something far darker. Princess, he said, voice low, I think I know where the story is going. No, Licia murmured, gazing out the window again, the reflection of stars flickering in her eyes. You only think you do. The truth, detective, is that the moment humans took ownership of our soil, the Crodal stopped seeing us as enemies. She turned back to him, expression hardening. They started seeing humanity as prey. The chamber lights dimmed as Princess Licia resumed her seat, her tone steady but darker than before. The weight of the next part of her story hung in the air, and even the drone seemed to buzz more quietly, as if sensing the shift in gravity. You asked why humanity intervened, she began softly. You've heard how we reached that delicate peace. Human ownership protecting Lyrian soil under Federation law. But peace, detective. Peace only lasts until greed finds a loophole. Fossip straightened, his antennae twitching. You're saying the Crodal didn't honor the new territorial registrations? They didn't even acknowledge them, Licia replied. 2 standard years after the transfer, our armies were stationed at the frontier, still holding the line against Crodal expansion attempts. The home valleys were quiet, too quiet. Then the Crodal struck. Her voice sharpened. 300 ships. Not raiders this time. A fleet. They descended on the valleys in waves, targeting every silvervine estate they could identify. Human-owned, all of them. My people tried to warn them, but communications were jammed. They slaughtered 63 human farmers, peaceful, unarmed, tending their crops for what your people call barbecue seasoning. The word barbecue sounded absurd in her mouth, as though she couldn't believe she had to say it aloud. Fawcett blinked, stunned. You're telling me the Croto risked open war over a culinary product? Alicia's expression hardened, her tone cutting through his disbelief. No, they started a war by murdering humans, on human-owned land. You think humanity cares what the crop was? To them, it was about property, law, and the blood of their own people spilled for greed. She paused, then added quietly, but yes, the fact that it was silver vine, the purple spice, made it personal. It wasn't just farmers they killed. It was the people who fed humanity's newest obsession. The detective's mandibles twitched, his green hue paling as he struggled to absorb the scale. And humanity's response? Her eyes glimmered like amethyst fire. Swift, absolute, terrifying. The room went silent except for her voice. 18 hours after the first distress beacon reached Earth, the Terran Confederacy's rapid response fleet jumped into our orbit. They didn't send diplomats. They didn't petition the Federation. They sent warships. Within minutes, every Croto vessel in Lyrian space received a single message: surrender and withdraw within 10 minutes, or be treated as hostile combatants responsible for the murder of Terran citizens. She drew in a breath, her tone almost reverent. The Croto laughed. They thought it was a bluff. No one had ever seen humanity act without sanction before. What happened? Fawcett whispered. What happens when an empire meets a species that doesn't bluff? She said simply. Her words fell like stones. At the 11-minute mark, the first human strike hit. Orbital interceptors carved through the Croto ships like glass. Within 20 hours, 1/3 of their entire military infrastructure was gone. Shipyards, command stations, weapon silos, all destroyed with surgical precision. Humanity didn't touch civilian targets, didn't occupy territory. They struck only the assets directly linked to the raids. Then they vanished. Her voice softened, but the silence that followed carried weight enough to fill the room. Fawcett's compound eyes dilated in shock. 1/3 of the Croto military. For 63 farmers? Alicia leaned forward. For 63 citizens, detective. For legal property under Terran registration. For violation of sovereignty. You of all people should understand that. Fawcett stammered. But over seasoning? Over. Alicia cut him off sharply. Not over seasoning. Over ownership. Over blood. Humanity didn't fight for Lyrians. They fought for themselves, and by doing so, they saved us. No contracts, no secret deals. The Croto fired first. The rest was consequence. He stared down at his data pads, claws trembling slightly. I need to confirm these claims. Speak to your sister, to her husband. Perhaps. They're beyond your reach, Alicia said flatly. On Earth. And Earth does not recognize Federation interrogation authority over its citizens, especially those who defend their own against unlawful aggression. Fawcett swallowed hard. The room had grown too quiet, the distant hum of ships outside muffled by the weight of revelation. Around them, the enforcers began quietly packing their equipment, no longer searching, no longer scanning. None met her gaze. He gathered his pads, movements unsteady. You realize this sets a dangerous precedent. Other species may take inspiration. She smiled faintly, coldly. Detective, we survived centuries of Federation inaction. If this precedent makes predators think twice, then it's a future I welcome. Fawcett lingered at the door, his compound eyes darting once toward her, as if wanting to say more. But in the end, he only nodded, voice low. I pray the next century doesn't burn for it. Then he left. The last of the enforcers filed out, their boots echoing softly through the marble corridor. The moment the doors sealed, Alicia exhaled, shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. End surveillance, she murmured. The palace AI confirmed clearance. One by one, the hovering drones powered down and docked. She crossed to her desk and activated a small silver orb, its lattice flickering with blue light. Quantum link. Secure channel. Recipient Earth. A moment later, the orb pulsed and a holographic projection formed. Her sister Vexa, radiant as always, standing in a garden bathed in Terran sunlight. Behind her, lush green plants swayed, and beside her stood Henry, broad-shouldered, sun-tanned, hands dirt-stained from gardening. "Licia!" Vexa's voice rang warm and musical. "You look tense. Did the interrogation go poorly?" Licia smiled faintly. "Poorly? No, but I may have aged a decade in the last hour. They wanted to pin the entire Crotal extinction on us." Henry chuckled, wiping his hands on a towel. "Over barbecue seasoning. You can't make that up." Vexa shot him a playful glare. "It wasn't just seasoning, darling." Licia arched a brow. "Tell that to the Federation. They nearly called it the barbecue war in their drafts." Henry laughed, but then his tone sobered. Still, it wasn't a war over spice. It was about rights, property, law, and murder. Every transaction was legal. The Crotals struck human land. We answered. Vexa nodded, touching a flower nearby. "Do you think they'll come after us again?" "Not soon," Licia said. "Even the Federation flinched when humanity acted that decisively. Their reports won't say it, but they're terrified." Henry leaned into frame, smirking. "You might be, too, if barbecue clubs started fundraising defense fleets." Licia blinked. "Excuse me?" Vexa laughed, brushing a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "He's not exaggerating. Human veterans and culinary guilds teamed up after the attack. Call it Operation Purple Shield. They monitor shipments, fund observation satellites, even sponsor Lyrian farming co-ops." Henry grinned proudly. "Barbecue associations, Licia. Real ones. They say protecting Silvervine is protecting the flavor of peace. The spice's price has tripled since the war. There are competitions, festivals, restaurants, entire channels dedicated to purple gold cuisine." Licia stared, torn between disbelief and amusement. "You mean humanity turned a war crime into a cultural renaissance?" Henry shrugged. "We call it marketing." Vex's laughter filled the air, bright and unrestrained. "Don't worry, sister. The humans may be mad, but there are madmen. And as long as they crave their purple spice, Lieria will never be alone again." Licia exhaled softly, her expression easing into something that was not quite a smile, but close. "Then maybe," she murmured, "that's the closest thing we'll ever have to peace." The hologram shimmered, the call fading out to the soft hum of the orb. Licia leaned back, gazing out the window as the stars rose. Tiny ancestral eyes watching from the dark. Silence lingered long after the call ended, the kind that filled Licia's royal chambers with uneasy calm. The hum of data screens softened, leaving only the quiet flicker of holographic light across her face. For the first time in weeks, there were no security alerts, no military updates, no panic reports from planetary governors. Just peace, and the faint echo of her sister's laughter still in her ears. Vexa had sounded lighter, freer than she had in years. She had announced the purchase of a sprawling farm in Montana, a wide plain under endless blue skies, soil-rich and temperate enough to host Lyrian flora. The property had been registered as Lyrian-owned under interstellar law, a symbolic gesture that rippled louder than any speech. It wasn't just commerce anymore, it was reciprocity. Lyrians cultivating their plants on human soil, protected by human law, sustained by mutual trust instead of treaties. When the transmission ended, Licia sat in silence a while, then turned her gaze to the news feeds hovering in midair. Across the Federation, senators and councilors bickered live, voices raised over the same phrase, disproportionate human retaliation. Others spoke in measured tones about the need to reassess human alignment. A few, braver or wiser, called a correction long overdue. The Crotal delegation issued brief statements, blaming criminal elements, as though 300 warships could be rogue. Their polished denials were already being dissected by journalists, mocked by memes, buried under human commentary that moved faster than Federation diplomacy ever could. Human feeds told a different story. No strategic maps, no casualty graphs, just 63 faces. Farmers, cooks, spouses, sons, daughters. People who had gone to another world to grow something special. Their names scrolled one by one beneath soft music, accompanied by images of their fields, lush, violet-tinted vines swaying in alien sunlight. Humanity mourned them not as victims of war, but as kindred spirits pursuing simple joys. Licia felt something tighten in her chest at the sight. For all the galaxy's talk of proportionality, these humans had reacted not with bureaucracy, but with conviction. To them, it had never been about politics. It was about murdered farmers, and that made it personal. She leaned back in her chair, letting her silver hair fall loose, and smiled faintly. They call it overkill, she thought. I call it justice. The Federation had spent centuries perfecting balance, laws, councils, committees, all designed to prevent conflict, yet none capable of stopping predation. Her people had obeyed every rule, filed every petition, and endured every raid. Humanity, by contrast, had skipped the forms and gone straight to principle. Protect your own, a creed older than their species' first spaceflight, yet stronger than any fleet. Her mind wandered back to Henry's laughter during the call. War over barbecue, he had joked, shaking his head. Yet behind that humor lay something profound, an understanding that connection often began with the simplest things. Food, family, shared joy. Even now, the purple spice had become a cultural phenomenon across human worlds. Barbecue contests, culinary documentaries, restaurants boasting authentic Lyrian-style grilling. The same spice that once fueled greed and war now bound two civilizations through taste. Outside her balcony, the twin moons of Lyris glimmered over the capital city. Once, those lights had seemed cold, symbols of unreachable power, of dependence on others. Now, they looked like guardians. The air smelled faintly of ozone and silver vine pollen, drifting from palace gardens replanted in memory of the fallen. The galaxy whispered of fear. Fear of human power, human rage. Licia saw something else entirely. Integrity sharpened into resolve. The Federation's fleets might command the stars, but humans commanded meaning. She whispered softly, almost reverently, warships pale against principles. Because for humans, no principle shone brighter than the promise to protect what was theirs, be it people, land, or even a patch of soil where vines grew purple under foreign suns. Licia turned off the screens. Tomorrow, new politics would begin, debates, statements, resolutions. But tonight, there was only the quiet pride of survival. Lyris had endured, not through Federation law, but through human spirit. The lesson was as clear as starlight. Strength wasn't in the weapons you wielded, but in the will to defend the things you love. Sometimes even the ones you share a meal with. And somewhere across the galaxy, in a farmhouse beneath Montana skies, the scent of roasted silver vine would rise again, an aroma of peace earned through fire, shared between species who finally understood each other.